I offered my fiancée a wedding ring, and she giggled and said, "You seriously expected I'd say yes?" The audience was clapping until she walked off. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the woman I'd planned to spend my life with. I had been planning the perfect proposal for 3 months, coordinating every detail with military precision, because I knew Lily appreciated thoughtful gestures and meaningful moments that showed how much someone cared. Her mother's 25th anniversary celebration at the prestigious Riverside Country Club in Richmond seemed like the ideal setting. 90 family members and friends gathered in the elegant ballroom to celebrate love and commitment, the same values I thought Lily and I shared after 2 years of building what I believed was a solid relationship. I worked closely with her brother Marcus to make sure she wore her lucky pearl necklace that night, the one her grandmother had given her, got formal permission from her stepfather Robert during a private dinner the week before where he gave me his enthusiastic blessing, and even arranged with the club's executive chef to prepare a custom chocolate souffle dessert with "Marry Me" written in elegant gold script, timed perfectly to arrive after the anniversary toast. I had researched everything from the perfect lighting in the ballroom to the exact moment that would feel most natural and romantic, wanting this to be a story we'd tell our children someday. The evening started perfectly, with Lily looking absolutely stunning in her emerald dress that complemented her dark hair beautifully, laughing with her cousins, and complimenting the floral arrangements I had secretly helped her mother select weeks earlier. She seemed relaxed and happy, dancing with her stepfather during the anniversary waltz and making jokes with the other family members about how romantic her parents still were after all these years. During the anniversary toast, when everyone was gathered around the head table with champagne glasses raised, I stood up and asked everyone to stay for just one more moment because I had something special to share with the family. I talked about witnessing the beautiful marriage Lily's parents had built over 25 years, how their love and commitment had inspired me to want that same kind of partnership, and how I hoped to create something equally meaningful and lasting with their daughter. The room was warm with smiles and anticipatory energy as I reached into my jacket pocket, and when I dropped to one knee and opened the ring box, a princess-cut solitaire I had chosen after months of research and saving. The room erupted in spontaneous applause and anticipatory smiles from people who clearly expected a joyful yes. That's when Lily started giggling, and my heart initially lifted thinking it was nervous excitement. But within seconds I realized this wasn't the nervous laughter of someone overwhelmed by emotion and happiness. It was something cold and mocking that made my stomach drop like I'd swallowed ice water, a sound that carried across the silent room and made everyone's celebratory expressions falter into confusion. "You seriously expected I'd say yes?" she announced to the suddenly silent room, her voice carrying that sharp, dismissive edge I'd only heard her use with people she genuinely disliked or found beneath her. The applause died instantly, replaced by confused murmurs and uncomfortable shifting as 90 people tried to process what they were witnessing, some looking at me with pity, others staring at Lily in shock. Lily grabbed her small purse from the table, muttered something about needing space and not being ready for this kind of pressure, then walked out of the ballroom with her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor while I remained kneeling with the ring, frozen in complete disbelief and humiliation. Her mother rushed after her, calling her name. Her stepfather looked mortified and started to approach me, and I slowly stood up, closed the ring box with shaking hands, and somehow managed to apologize to the guests for the awkward ending to what should have been a beautiful celebration of love and family. The drive home to our shared townhouse was the longest 20 minutes of my life, replaying her expression over and over in my mind. Not shock or panic or even regret, but something that looked almost like satisfaction, as if she'd been planning this public humiliation all along and had finally gotten her moment to execute it perfectly. After Lily didn't return to our townhouse for 2 nights, I started noticing things that should have been obvious before, but somehow escaped my attention during the chaos of trying to process what had happened at the anniversary party. Her laptop bag was missing from the home office we shared, along with her favorite jewelry box that contained the diamond earrings I'd given her for her birthday and the vintage bracelet she'd inherited from her grandmother. Most of her belongings were still scattered around our bedroom and bathroom like she'd left in a hurry, but the specific items she'd taken suggested this wasn't just a spontaneous emotional reaction. She had grabbed the things that mattered most to her, the valuable pieces that would be difficult to replace. I kept checking my phone for texts or calls, expecting some kind of explanation or at least an acknowledgement of how brutal the whole situation had been. But there was nothing except a growing silence that felt more deliberate with each passing hour. Tyler, my old roommate from college who'd attended the party with his girlfriend, came by the second day with takeout and beer, clearly uncomfortable, but trying to be supportive in that awkward way guys do when relationships explode publicly. "Man, I don't know what to say about Saturday night," he started, settling onto the couch while I mechanically ate Chinese food I couldn't taste. "That was brutal to watch, and I felt horrible for you up there." I appreciated his honesty more than the polite platitudes I'd been getting from other people who witnessed the disaster. But then Tyler shifted uncomfortably and mentioned something that made my stomach drop all over again. "Look, I probably shouldn't say anything, but I noticed some weird stuff during dinner that didn't make sense at the time." He explained how he'd seen Lily exchanging meaningful looks with someone across the ballroom during the main course, subtle glances that seemed too intentional and frequent to be casual. I thought maybe it was just family drama or something, but then I saw her step outside during her dad's speech to take a phone call, and when she came back, she looked kind of flushed and secretive. Tyler said he'd overheard her telling her cousin that the call was from her yoga instructor Amber about rescheduling a session, which struck him as odd timing for a fitness appointment discussion during a family celebration. The more Tyler talked, the more a sick realization began forming in my mind that maybe Lily's cruel rejection wasn't spontaneous cruelty. Maybe she'd been planning her exit strategy for weeks and had just been waiting for the right moment to execute it. I thanked Tyler for his honesty, but after he left, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to understand what had really been happening in the relationship I thought I knew so well. I decided to check our shared phone plan online, something I'd never done before because I trusted her completely and respected her privacy. But the public humiliation had earned me the right to understand what I'd actually been dealing with. What I discovered made everything click into place in the most painful way possible. Dozens of calls and texts over the past 3 months to a number listed under Amber that, when I reverse searched it, traced back to a male coworker named Owen from her marketing firm. The call log showed conversations that lasted 45 minutes to an hour, often late at night when I thought she was reading or watching Netflix beside me in bed, and text message frequency that increased dramatically right around the time she'd started seeming distant and distracted. I felt like a complete fool for not recognizing the signs. But then I remembered her laptop and decided to check our joint credit card statements online, something else I'd never done because we'd always been transparent about finances and spending. The evidence was even worse than I'd feared. Charges for romantic dinners at expensive restaurants I'd never been to, weekend getaway hotels in Virginia Beach and Williamsburg during times she claimed to be visiting her sick grandmother in Norfolk, and couple spa treatments that she'd apparently been enjoying with Owen while telling me she was having girls' weekends with her college friends. The most crushing discovery was seeing that some of these expenses had been charged to our joint savings account, money we'd been setting aside for our future together, including the wedding I'd been planning and the house down payment we'd been working toward for over a year. As I dug deeper into our financial history over the next few days, the full scope of Lily's deception became clear, and I realized that what I'd thought was a loving partnership had actually been a carefully orchestrated plan to use me as her personal investment fund while she built a completely separate life. The evidence was overwhelming once I started looking at it objectively instead of through the lens of trust and love that had blinded me for months. I had paid for her entire graduate degree in marketing communications at Virginia Commonwealth University, writing tuition checks totaling $18,500 over 18 months because she claimed her family couldn't afford to help and she didn't want to take on student loan debt that would hurt her credit score. I had helped her lease the luxury SUV she drove by co-signing the loan when her credit wasn't quite good enough to qualify for the premium model she wanted, and I had even provided the $3,200 down payment for her professional wardrobe when she started her new job at the marketing firm where she apparently met Owen. Looking back through our email history, I found messages where she'd thanked me profusely for investing in our future together and believing in her dreams, while she was apparently already planning her exit strategy with another man. The financial manipulation went even deeper than direct payments. She had convinced me to add her as a beneficiary on my investment portfolio and life insurance policy, claiming it was a natural step for couples planning to get married. And she had been using my employee discounts and professional connections to advance her career in ways I was only now beginning to understand. I remembered introducing her to several clients and colleagues at networking events, helping her build relationships that led to freelance projects and eventually her current position, all while she was telling Owen that she was financially independent and self-made. According to the text messages I'd managed to recover from our shared cloud storage. The most painful realization was discovering a draft email in her personal account that she'd apparently started writing to Owen but never sent, describing me as her transition plan and explaining how she needed to manage the breakup carefully to avoid losing the financial stability she'd built while exploring their relationship. She had calculated everything: the timing, the public humiliation, even the fact that a dramatic proposal rejection would make me look like the desperate one while positioning her as the victim of unwanted pressure. I spent an entire weekend going through bank statements, credit card records, and financial documents, building a complete picture of how thoroughly she had used me while planning her escape. And by Sunday night, I wasn't just heartbroken anymore. I was furious at my own naivety and determined to make sure she faced some consequences for the way she'd manipulated both my emotions and my finances. The woman who had publicly humiliated me in front of 90 people hadn't just rejected my proposal. She had systematically stolen from me, lied to me, and built her entire new life foundation using my resources and trust while making me believe we were building something together. I realized that what I had interpreted as love and partnership had actually been a long-term con game, and the cruel laughter at the proposal wasn't just rejection. It was her victory celebration for successfully executing a plan that had been months in the making. This wasn't about getting revenge, because I'm not that kind of person, but I wasn't going to let her walk away clean after the level of deception and financial fraud she'd committed while pretending to love me. And I started formulating a plan that would ensure she faced the natural consequences of her choices without me having to become the villain in anyone's story. I decided the best approach was to gather information before taking any action, so I created a fake LinkedIn profile as a business development consultant and reached out to Owen under the pretense of exploring potential partnerships with his advertising agency, something that would seem completely natural given the interconnected business community in Richmond. It took 3 days for him to respond, but when he did, he was enthusiastic about meeting to discuss opportunities, clearly eager to expand his professional network and impress what he thought was a potential client. We arranged to meet at Millie's Diner, an upscale coffee shop in downtown Richmond that I knew would be comfortable and casual enough for him to speak freely without feeling like he was in a formal business interview. Owen turned out to be exactly what I'd expected: confident, well-dressed, and completely oblivious to the fact that he was sitting across from the man whose life he'd helped destroy. He spent the first 20 minutes talking about his recent promotion to senior account manager and how much he loved working in Richmond's growing marketing sector, mentioning several campaigns he'd managed and clients he was particularly proud of landing. Then he started talking about his personal life, mentioning his amazing girlfriend, who also worked in marketing but was dealing with a complicated breakup situation that had been stressful for both of them. "She's incredible," Owen said, stirring his latte with genuine enthusiasm. "Really smart, ambitious, knows exactly what she wants from life. She's been going through this messy situation with her ex-boyfriend who apparently ambushed her with a proposal at a family event even though she'd been trying to break up with him for months." I nearly choked on my coffee listening to this complete revision of our relationship history, but I managed to maintain my composure and ask follow-up questions that encouraged him to keep talking. According to Owen's version of events, which was obviously Lily's narrative, I had been emotionally manipulative and controlling with money, refusing to let her have independence or make her own choices about the relationship's future. The poor guy apparently had this whole elaborate proposal planned without even asking if she was ready for marriage. Owen continued, shaking his head sympathetically. She said he'd been pressuring her for months about getting engaged, and when she tried to have honest conversations about slowing things down, he just ignored her wishes and pushed ahead with this public spectacle to trap her into saying yes. The lies were so extensive and detailed that I realized Lily had been constructing this alternative reality for months, probably building Owen's sympathy and positioning herself as the victim before she ever rejected my proposal. When I felt like I had heard enough of his perspective, I casually mentioned that it was interesting how small Richmond's professional community was, and that I'd actually heard about his recent promotion through a mutual connection. Really? Who do you know at the agency? Owen asked, genuinely curious about the connection. That's when I revealed that Marcus Chun, the CEO who had hired him, was actually my former business school classmate and someone I'd specifically recommended when Owen's resume came across Marcus's desk 6 months ago. The color drained from Owen's face as he realized that his current job, his recent promotion, and his entire career trajectory in Richmond had been facilitated by the man he'd been unknowingly betraying with his girlfriend. "Wait, are you?" he started, and I simply nodded and said, "Cameron, nice to finally meet you, Owen." The conversation that followed was awkward but enlightening, as Owen processed the fact that both men had been manipulated by Lily, who had used my professional connections to secure Owen's career advancement while simultaneously painting me as the villain in her fabricated story about our relationship and its dramatic end. Instead of creating a public spectacle or seeking dramatic revenge like some people might have done, I decided to methodically dismantle the web of lies Lily had constructed by strategically revealing the truth to key people who had the authority and responsibility to take appropriate action based on the facts. My approach was calculated but fair. I wasn't going to destroy her life out of spite, but I also wasn't going to let her benefit from deception and manipulation without facing natural consequences for her choices. The first call I made was to Marcus Chun, my business school friend and the CEO of Owen's advertising agency, who had unknowingly hired someone involved in an undisclosed workplace relationship that violated company policy. I arranged to meet Marcus for lunch at our usual spot and presented him with documented evidence of Lily's systematic deception, including bank statements showing the joint account misuse, screenshots of the fabricated stories she'd been telling Owen about our relationship, and proof that she had been using company resources and connections inappropriately. "This is a mess, Cameron," Marcus said after reviewing everything, his expression growing more serious as he understood the implications. "The undisclosed relationship is problematic enough, but if Owen has been using company funds for personal expenses with her, that's a terminable offense that could expose us to liability issues." Marcus confirmed that both the failure to disclose the relationship and any misuse of company resources were clear violations of corporate policy that would require immediate investigation and likely disciplinary action. I also provided Marcus with documentation showing how Lily had been misrepresenting herself professionally, claiming credit for connections and opportunities that had actually come through my network, while simultaneously destroying my reputation with lies about emotional manipulation and controlling behavior. The next step was arranging what would appear to be an innocent dinner with Lily herself, something that required careful planning since she'd been avoiding all contact with me since the proposal disaster 3 weeks earlier. I texted her from a new number, claiming I wanted to return some of her belongings and discuss practical matters like the lease on our townhouse, which was jointly signed and couldn't be ignored indefinitely. She agreed to meet me at Romano's, the Italian restaurant where we'd had our first official date 2 years ago, probably thinking the sentimental location would give her some emotional leverage if I tried to win her back or create a scene. Instead, I arrived early, requested a quiet corner table, and prepared a manila folder containing bank statements, phone records, screenshots of her false social media posts about being newly single and loving life, and copies of the credit card charges for her secret dates with Owen that had been funded partially with our shared savings. When Lily walked in wearing a new dress I'd never seen before and looking nervous but defiant, I stood up politely and waited for her to sit down before sliding the folder across the table without any dramatic presentation or emotional outburst. "I'm not here to argue or ask you to come back," I said calmly as she opened the folder and began processing what she was looking at. "I just thought you should know that I'm aware of everything. Owen, the financial fraud, the lies you've been telling about our relationship, and the way you've been using my professional connections to advance both of your careers while destroying my reputation." I watched her face cycle through surprise, panic, anger, and finally a kind of calculating assessment as she realized the scope of what I discovered and documented. This is all going to come out naturally through the appropriate channels, I continued, signaling the waiter for the check, even though we hadn't ordered anything. I'm not going to be vindictive or dramatic about it, but I'm also not going to protect you from the consequences of your choices anymore. The conversation ended with me leaving cash on the table for the drinks we hadn't touched and walking out while Lily sat alone with the folder, finally understanding that her carefully constructed web of deception was about to collapse around her in ways she couldn't control or manipulate. Within 48 hours of that dinner, Lily's carefully constructed new life began crumbling as the consequences of her deception unfolded with a speed and thoroughness that surprised even me, though I felt no satisfaction watching someone's world fall apart. Just relief that the truth was finally surfacing after months of manipulation and lies. Marcus moved quickly once he had all the documentation, conducting a formal investigation that revealed Owen had indeed been using company expense accounts for some of their romantic dinners, claiming them as client entertainment when no business had actually been conducted, which constituted fraud against the company. Both Lily and Owen were terminated within 24 hours for policy violations, with Owen facing the additional consequence of losing his visa sponsorship and having to return to Canada within 30 days since his work authorization was tied to his employment at the agency. The professional fallout spread quickly through Richmond's interconnected business community, with several other firms quietly removing Lily from consideration for positions she'd been discussing, since word travels fast in marketing circles about people who misrepresent their professional background and engage in workplace misconduct. Lily's mother called me directly the day after the terminations, her voice shaking with embarrassment and anger, to apologize for her daughter's behavior and reveal that she'd learned the truth from Marcus, who happened to be her neighbor's son and had felt obligated to explain the situation when she asked about the sudden job loss. "Cameron, I am so ashamed of what Lily did to you," Mrs. Patterson said, clearly emotional. "That proposal was beautiful, and the way she handled it was cruel and completely unacceptable. I raised her better than that." She went on to explain that the family group chat had erupted in chaos when Lily's brother Marcus accidentally forwarded screenshots of some of the evidence to their extended family instead of just to their parents, meaning aunts, uncles, and cousins now knew the full scope of her deception and manipulation. Lily's social media presence vanished almost overnight. Instagram account deactivated, professional LinkedIn profile deleted, Facebook privacy settings locked down, as she tried to control the narrative and limit the damage to her reputation. But the silence only made people more curious about what had really happened. Mutual friends began reaching out to me with apologies and revelations about suspicious behavior they'd witnessed but hadn't understood at the time, with several people admitting they'd noticed Lily acting secretive and distracted during group gatherings, but had assumed it was just relationship stress rather than an elaborate double life. Owen sent me a brief but revealing message through LinkedIn before his account was deactivated, explaining that after their termination, Lily had immediately turned on him, blaming him for ruining everything by not being more careful about the company expense accounts and suggesting he should have kept quiet about their relationship to avoid the investigation. "She showed her true colors the moment things got difficult," Owen wrote. "When I asked if we could work through this together, she said she needed to focus on damage control and couldn't afford to be associated with someone who'd lost his visa status." The most crushing blow to Lily's carefully planned future came when she discovered that her dream job offer at Peterson & Associates, a competing firm where she'd been interviewing for a senior marketing position, was rescinded after they conducted a routine background check and contacted her previous employer for references, learning about the circumstances of her termination and the ethical violations that led to it. 5 months after the proposal disaster at her parents' anniversary party, I had completely rebuilt my life around my own goals and values rather than trying to meet someone else's expectations or fund their manipulative agenda. And for the first time in years, I felt genuinely excited about my future instead of anxious about maintaining someone else's lifestyle. I used the money I'd been saving for our wedding, nearly $15,000 that would have gone toward a celebration of what I now realized was a complete lie, to start my own financial consulting firm, something I dreamed about for years but had postponed because Lily always had some expense or crisis that required my immediate financial attention. My new office was in a converted warehouse in Richmond's Arts District, a space that reflected my personality rather than the conservative, traditional image Lily had always insisted I maintain to impress her family and social circle. I also moved out of our shared townhouse and into a modern loft apartment with exposed brick walls and large windows, a place that felt like home immediately rather than like a showroom designed to project success to people whose opinions shouldn't have mattered. The business thrived from day one, as former colleagues and clients appreciated my integrity and work ethic, traits that had been overshadowed by relationship drama for too long, but now could finally shine in a professional environment where I controlled my own reputation. I reconnected with photography, a passion I'd abandoned while trying to support Lily's ambitions and social calendar, and started spending weekends exploring Virginia's landscapes with my camera instead of attending networking events and dinner parties that had felt like performance art. My life had structure and purpose again, built around activities and relationships that actually fulfilled me rather than drained my energy and bank account. The final confrontation came on a rainy Tuesday evening in October when Lily showed up at my office building, looking defeated in a way that would have broken my heart 6 months earlier, but now just made me feel sad for the person she'd become through her own choices. She'd clearly been struggling, thinner than I'd ever seen her, wearing clothes that looked worn rather than carefully curated, carrying herself with none of the confident energy that had first attracted me to her at that party 3 years ago. "Cameron, please, I just need 5 minutes," she said as I exited the elevator, her voice lacking the sharp edge it had carried during our last dinner together. I agreed to talk in the building's lobby, a neutral space where I could maintain appropriate boundaries without being cruel or dismissive, though I had no illusions about what this conversation would entail. She explained that she'd lost her apartment after burning through her savings trying to maintain her lifestyle without stable income, had maxed out her credit cards during the months of unemployment, and had been cut off by her family after they discovered additional lies she'd told about our relationship and her financial situation. "I made the biggest mistake of my life," Lily said, tears streaming down her face in what appeared to be genuine remorse rather than the calculated manipulation I'd grown accustomed to recognizing. "You were the only person who ever truly supported me, who believed in my potential and invested in my future, and I threw it all away for someone who abandoned me the moment things got difficult." I listened without interrupting, but I could see that even this apology was still fundamentally self-centered, focused on what she'd lost rather than the pain she'd caused or the trust she'd violated through months of systematic deception. "I know I don't deserve it after everything I did to you, but could we maybe try again?" she continued. "I realize now that what we had was real, and I was just scared of commitment and made horrible choices because I was immature and didn't understand what actually mattered in life." I looked at this woman who had once held so much power over my emotions and realized that I felt nothing but mild pity for someone who still didn't understand that love isn't about finding someone to fund your dreams. It's about finding someone whose dreams align with yours and building something together based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. "Lily, what you're describing isn't love," I said gently but firmly. "You're asking me to take you back now that you need financial stability again, which is exactly the same pattern that got us here in the first place. You didn't love me. You loved what I could provide for you. And now that you've lost that security, you want it back." I paused, watching her process this reality that she'd probably been avoiding for months. "You taught me the most valuable lesson of my life by rejecting that proposal the way you did. You showed me that I deserve someone who sees me as a partner, not as a means to an end, and I'm genuinely grateful for that painful but necessary wake-up call." As she walked away into the rain, shoulders shaking with sobs that I knew were genuine, but also knew were primarily about her own situation rather than genuine remorse for the damage she'd caused, I reflected on how her cruel public rejection had actually saved me from a lifetime of being used by someone who saw relationships as transactions rather than partnerships. I was building a life based on my own values and dreams now, surrounded by people who appreciated my character rather than my bank account. And for the first time since that humiliating night at the country club, I felt truly free to become the person I was meant to be without someone else's agenda defining my worth or direction.